Well,
Folks, sorry for the delay. We now have coffee also, so you can grab some coffee if you want. And while or just after you had your coffee, we are going to get started. Sorry, everything's coming together a little late. We are ready. If anybody wants, otherwise we just go ahead with the program today. So I wanted to welcome everyone this afternoon for making it on a wonderful sunny day to hear Dr. Vivek Kumar on Modernization and Globalization, understanding social exclusion in South Asia. Professor Vivek Kumar is an associate professor at the Center for Study of Social Systems at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. I'll read his bio, and after that, we will start. Dr. Vivek Kumar is a visiting associate professor in sociology currently at the Sociology Department at Columbia University, and a Fulbright Teaching Fellow in residence at the South Asia Institute. Vivek Kumar is appointed as an associate professor at the Center for the Study of Social Systems in the School of Social Sciences at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he earned his Ph.D. His major areas of interest are the issues of Dalits, marginalized sections of India, and global African community struggles. He has been engaged in comparative issues of Dalits and African Americans. He's been a visiting professor at the Universities of Pune, Jammu and Mumbai in India. And his recent publications include a co-edited volume, Dynamics of Change and Continuity in the Age of Globalization, Voices from the Margins. This was 2009. And the monographs, Dalit Society, Old Problems and New Aspirations, 2007. And India's Roaring Revolution, Dalit Assertion and New Horizons in 2006. Professor Kumar is currently involved in an ongoing research project, Social Status and Social Attitudes in India, a study of Indian college students with Professor Jim Sidanius of Harvard and Arjun Bharadwaj, University of British Columbia. He was also called by the Planning Commission of India and Empowerment and Social Justice Ministry of India for the formulation of the upcoming 12th Fifth-Year Plan of India. This program is supported by the Alliance for a Secular and Democratic South Asia. We welcome you, and I will invite Professor Kumar to begin his talk. Thank you. He can advance the slides.
Let me at the outset thank the organizers to giving me this opportunity to speak in front of this august gallery, and also let me thank Fulbright Fellowship for giving me this opportunity to come here to US and be in residence with South Asian Institute. Friends, this whole problem which began in 2009 when I was researching on globalization issue. And as a sociologist, I teach Indian society. So I just want to throw two questions in front of you. One, the history of India is 4,000 years old. And if you take the process of globalization, it is hardly 20 years. So it's a point fraction, some history of India. And even then, social scientists, politicians, they have started concluding certain things. And one very important statement they made was Shining India. Shining India campaign. And it went on and on. It went so much that one political party lost the elections. So, going by that history, a fraction of history of India, I just want to take you fast because I teach full semester. And you can say that I have to compress that little history and come to the point. So what I'll do is that I'll take a very fast tour in the making of Indian society itself. The enigma today which we call as Indian society, I want to make you understand in very lucid terms, and then come to the point that how these two processes which we are talking, modernization and Indian globalization, they should be understood from the perspective of South Asians. We can very well imagine that, we can go directly to, page 5. What we know as actually, India today. So what I do is usually we take, 10 epochs in the making of Indian society. And from there onwards, the process of modernization begins. So this 4,000 year history can be compressed into 10 epochs. And the first epoch we can say is the Indus Valley civilization. That is from where the Indian history begins. But it is not a history, it is a proto-history because the script has not yet been deciphered. And from there we can say that the second epoch is the advent of the Aryans. They came from outside. The emergence of Buddhism and Jainism can be called as third epoch into the making of Indian history. And advent of Islam is the fourth. So you see that slowly and gradually the complication and diversities are increasing. And we are traveling. Then the fifth epoch, you can say another religion comes, and that is Sikhism. The rise of bhakti movements, different types of bhakti movements, both formless God and reverence of actually, ideal type, worship, temple entry, all can be called as sixth epoch in the making of Indian history. And then the long history of colonialism, epochs, that is what I'm talking about. Now somewhere here, 15th century, that the world history is also changing. The geographical explorations are beginning, and they go to their search of other worlds. And it is here, friends, that three worlds are created. The first world, the second world, and the third world. The first world is white. The second world is somewhere in deep black seas. And the third world is, of course, the India. These three worlds are being created by the search. I call it as three others were created during this geographical explorations. Because the world was not the world at that time. I'll come to that a little bit later. So the advent of Europeans in India can be called as the making of seventh epoch into the Indian history. And I have come from, you can understand, 2,500 years of history I have already crossed. Now, this, you can say that, number of Europeans came, French, Dutch, and of course, last to come were British, and last to leave, of course. And from here, that the process of modernization started taking place. That's what we are told. We can contest that the process of modernization in India began with the advent of Europeans when they started bringing out sweeping changes in different institutions. Education, judiciary, bureaucracy, transport, and they were bringing sweeping changes, and all of a sudden, we have a very, very different ruler itself. Now, it is here that the process of modernization is converted, and let me go directly to page number 90. Now, if you see this, we are trying to present a dichotomy of modernization and traditional societies. The four important elements of modernization or modern societies and four elements of traditional societies. Now, the debate began whether societies can be dichotomous as they are, or they are in continuum. They are in process of evolution. Now, as a sociologist, we tried to argue that what came to India as modern was a tradition of someone. And that was preached us as modern. So whether we should take it as it is, or we have to change something or impact, something has to be dissociated from the larger whole and then clubbed together and produce something. Now this went on. Now people can also talk about some objective conditions of modernity and some objective conditions of traditional societies. Now objective conditions of modernity were proclaimed as urbanization, great urbanization, industrialization, affluence, or you can say literacy. These were four important objective conditions which were given by Karl Marx. But he was trying to give another four conditions for traditional societies. Rampant rural society, and still India is rural. 70% of India, according to 2011 census, is still rural. Rampant agriculture as occupation, it is there. And then of course illiteracy and poverty. And poverty, one can debate what is the definition, how the nation has defined poverty itself can be discussed. Now this process of, friends, these processes are then, the seventh epochs become very important, because then the world is changing and India is also trying to change. But here, I would like to see that whether there can be only one type of modernity or there are multiple types of modernity. This is the question which South Asians have been asking. And we were always told that modernity can be only unidirectional. What is coming from West is always modern. We never had anything at our disposal. But if that is the case, then the civilizations become passive recipient of the cultures, and they do not invent on their own. They do not react as if that they are passive recipient of the cultures. That was the clause. And then people started asking this question as well. that if the traditions can be multiple, how can modernity be only one? And this is here, friend, I want to search that, yes, there is not a modernity, there are multiple modernities. And at least I want to spell out 3 modernities for you. The first world modernity. The first world modernity came out of Industrial Revolution. And it is in this context, the polity, the civil society, and economy were bifurcated, separated from each other. Economy, polity, and society. Direct, bifurcations, 3 compartments can be seen after Industrial Revolution ushered. But there was not the world only with this modernity. The second world emerged, and the second world modernity emerged out of ideological revolution. What was the difference between the first world and the second world modernity? That the polity and market merged together. There was no separateness of modernity and the separateness of market and polity. The state itself became producer. And it is here that second world modernity emerged. Now these modernities created 2 worlds, the first world and the second world. And of course the Cold War was the gift. But what's the project of these 2 modern worlds? This is the question which South Asian started asking. What was the project? And the project of the 2 worlds was how to usurp the third world. Both the world wanted to bring the third world, and third world was emerging out of another type of modernity. And this modernity was revolution against colonialism. Revolution against colonialism. The third world was trying to emerge. But friends, colonialism is also not of one type. I can see at least 2 types of colonialism. One was retreatist colonialism, and another is replicative colonialism. Retreatist and replicative. If you see the first world modernity which was trying to usurp, they went and replicated their language, their religion in different parts of the world and came back. But when they went to India, they could not suppress the existing culture there. They could not suppress the existing language, and still 1600 mother tongues are spoken. So we can very well understand that colonialism which went there, dropped certain elements, institutions, and retreated back. So we still have that English is spoken only by 2% of Indians. 2% of Indians. And rest, of course, go by their own vernaculars. And yet, you can say that they ruled for 200 years. So even if they would have, ruled forever, they could not have decimated the indigenous culture, what we are talking. So this third world modernity, which was coming out of revolution against colonialism, opted a very different path. And this path was of a mixed economy. They did not toe the line of capitalist countries or socialist countries, but they had their own model. And this was basically a mixed economy. So we can see very well that, even modernity which was being posed that it is unidimensional and it has produced, 3 worlds. First world, second world, and third world. and therefore there can be multiple modernities as well. So modernity cannot be taken as unidimensional or unidirectional or one type. There has to be multiple. And it is in this context, friends, that the whole path of India entered into 8th epoch, and this epoch was, of course, the bifurcation of the country, the division of the country. Can we go there? No, this is.
Go back.
Yeah, we have to go back. I think.
Partition. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, partition of India. Yeah, it was, of course, the painful, exercise which we had to see. Why I'm giving you this? Now the shape of South Asia is also taking place. 1947, we have India as one. But now, 15th of August, 1947, Pakistan also emerges. The face of South Asia is changing. The colonials are retreating, and a country is bifurcated, 2 countries are born, and the identity struggle begins. And of course, actually, we wanted to, try to put the problem in with the process of parliamentary democracy. That's what is the 10th epoch, we can say. And formulation of the constitution, and in which we tried to solve so many problems. We tried to look how this whole process of confluence of modernity and tradition, that's we started, and number of books were written by political scientists, sociologists, modernization of Indian traditions. And there was another work, full-length work by Chicago social scientist Rudolphs and Rudolph's wife-husband team, modernity of tradition. So they could understand that tradition cannot be done away with, but it can be changed. And it is in this context, friends, that I want to bring today's process. And it is here we enter in, of course, the 12th epoch, and that is process of globalization. So after modernization, which we began with the constitution, and in which we gave, or we tried to, merge the elements which we were talking about. Egalitarianism, hierarchy, individualism, holism. We were talking about ascribed and achieved. We were talking this worldly and otherworldliness. So we tried to merge some of these elements and create a very different type of modernity for ourselves. But by the time we were grappling, by the time we were trying to solve our problems, 80s, 70s, 80s, the onslaught of globalization came. So before we could solve the problem, the traditional problems, with the process where we were trying to bring in modernity and tradition together, have a dialogue and solve our problems with 3-language formula, with caste being actually relegated to periphery, individuals becoming very important for rights and privileges in the constitution, another process comes. And this is process of globalization. Now, as a sociologist, again, we have to grapple and we have to understand the process of globalization from our own perspective, because economists will start explaining process of globalization from their vantage point. Technologists from their point of view. But how sociologists have tried. Economists try to argue that globalization is a process by which there is fast exchange of capital. Technologists will say that left, of course, the information revolution is the process of globalization, in which, or because of which, there is compression and compression of time and space. So within no time you can receive data, and actually within no time you can reach in any corner of the world. Compression of time and space can be called as process of globalization for them. But for sociologists, we need to have a multi-dimensional definition of process of globalization, and we try to understand process of globalization with this multi-dimensionality. But before I do that, let me give you 2-3 anecdotes so that we can understand this process a little bit more clearly. Now, to understand globalization, I will invoke very primary and rudimentary concepts which we teach in sociology, that is material culture and non-material culture. Culture cannot be understood as a monolithic whole. It has different dimensions. As a sociologist, we see material culture and non-material culture. And it is also said that material culture travel very fast and non-material culture very slow. And therefore, it is Franz Boas, the Paul is right, cultural gap. Usually there is a cultural lag. So we have to understand, for understanding process of globalization in South Asia, we have to understand this process also, that how material cultures have traveled India so fast. Whether the non-material culture has also traveled India the same speed? I will leave this question here. I'll discuss it further. Now the second question is that the process of globalization is not the only process of social change which is ushering in India. There are simultaneously number of processes which are going on. And these processes range from social change within the own society, which emerge from within. Our Professor Weissing calls them as orthogenetic changes or sources of orthogenetic change, and there are heterogenetic sources also. So globalization is a process which has come from outside, not from within. Now we have to understand that how these processes then will dent India. And the third is, of course, the question of availability, accessibility, and adaptability. Now these three premises have to be kept in mind before we harp on to understand process of globalization in Indian society, keeping the international geopolitical situation, of course, in mind, that how three words were created and how the first word and second word created was trying to usher on. Now, having defined this process of globalization, let me come to this, that after 1990s, or you can say during this period, the second world withered away. With fall of Russia, the first world withered away. And therefore there was a quotation. Most of the people started one word. There is only one word. And we, of course, were afraid. There is one word. And we were also told in South Asia, one word, one culture. That is the equation which is going to emerge. And that is this question. It starts talking about that how can there be, or is there a process of one world, one culture? Is it going to be? Is it a possibility? Those people who believed that one world, one culture, it was they who started giving the India Shining campaign. But those who did not believe, they tried to analyze a little bit of this. And let me run through these four processes of globalization in India, in South Asia, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and of course Sri Lanka. Now if you see that the process of globalization as a process of social change gives you an impression of homogenization. what is available in Boston in some market is also available in New York, is also available in New Delhi. And all of a sudden people think, yes, there is this process of homogenization taking place. So I'm talking about material culture. This first process, go back. Yeah. Homogenization. It is available in most of the countries. You click one button and you will access these actually sites. So it's available. But availability is not only, homogenization is not the only process which is there. The process is of pluralization also taking place. And what is this pluralization? The process is that along with the articles, along with the elements, along with the institutions which are coming from the West, from the different parts of the world, whether it is Europe or whether it's America, whether it's Latin America, wherever from, whatever regions which are coming to South Asia, they are not doing away with the indigenous institutions. The indigenous institutions remain as they are. So globalization has not done away with feudalism. Globalization has not done away with casteism, communalism. They all remain there. So I will say there's a process of pluralization which is also there. Now along with this pluralization, there's a process of traditionalization as well. Now what is this process of traditionalization? Now usually what happens that when the institutions, the cultural elements, they come to an indigenous population, the indigenous population is always afraid of their identity being decimated. There is always this danger that, look, this whole identity which is coming, the cultural elements which are coming, will sway away. They'll take away my own existence. My whole existence is in danger. And therefore, the traditional forces start raising their heads. So those who have been in Mumbai know about Shiv Sainiks. And Shiv Sainiks will be in arms on 14th of February. 14th of February? Everybody knows it, of course. Valentine's Day, of course. So 14th of February, there will not be cards with heart on them. They should not be displayed. There cannot be a Valentine's Day celebration in any motel. You are ruining our culture. And then what will happen? In television, all of a sudden we see that translation of geographical, what is that? Channel? National Geographic. So National Geographical in Telugu, in Tamil, in Kannada. All of a sudden cartoons, cartoons, all these sites which were once upon a time coming in English, they are all now translated into regional vernacular languages. I don't know how much they have lost, but yes, there is great assertion. No, you have to learn, you have to live, and you have to wear. This is the sermon which is going on among the fundamentalists. Now, the last process is a process of hybridization. So the culture has come, McDonald's has come, MTV has come, but we cannot have McDonald's burger with ham and beef like that. We cannot have that. So we have taken out ham and beef and put our potato cutlet and have produced a McDonald's burger. Have it. Now this is the process of hybridization, and happily, McDonald's is minting money on this. Cutlet burger. Not only that, you take MTV. What is MTV? Have you heard Punjabi pop? The words are Punjabi and music is pop. And similarly, Bhangra, Hindi pop is also there. So you have tried to appropriate some part of the culture and you have habituated that and put your own and produced a new hybrid variety and happily living with globalization. Fantastic. But it is here, friends, that we have to stop and ponder. And this process is process of exclusion. I may not read a Marxist agenda here, may look also reading a Marxist agenda, but that is what the reality of Indian society is. Now, those who could innovate, those who could really get access, those who wanted to have, they have done it. And they are trying to travel in this path. But we have to think also, a process which takes place there also, and this is processes of social exclusion. Now, if you go to social exclusion, this is a very, very dangerous process of social exclusion along with globalization. Yeah. And this process of social exclusion, if you take, you can define social exclusion, denial of opportunities of people, denial of opportunities to people in different realms, social, economic, and political, and they may also have intersectionality, and out of that, a deep historical exclusion takes place. And India is notorious because it has its historically excluded population. 8% of were Aboriginal Indians called as scheduled tribes, and another 180 million called scheduled castes and now called as Dalits. Now this social exclusion, if you take, is structural in nature. It is structural. And what is structure? I can use this term from S.F. Nadel, who defined structure in terms of roles and statuses distributed in a society. So there are people who have given certain roles and others statuses. Certain have given privileges, others are denied. So this is the way they have produced structural exclusion in the society. This is historical. And that's why I said that 2,500 years history has to be taken into consideration before we start evaluating a process which is so near, which is started in 1990s. Usually we do not take historicity into consideration of evaluating a process. We start evaluating a process sometimes, without any historical analysis. Now this process of social exclusion is systemic as well. It is systemic. It is systemic because it is not taking naturally. It is not taking naturally. Because of certain system, certain people were or are being excluded also. That is also we have to understand. There is a system. And it has an agency. Exclusion also has an agency. It is not happening naturally on its own. Certain group are inflicting exclusion on the others. So we have to understand structural, systemic, and long historicity of exclusion, and last but not the least, cumulative nature of exclusion. We are not talking about exclusion of one sphere of the society, that is economically certain people do not have purchasing power. I am not talking exclusion of that type. I am talking about, can we show that exclusion? This is page number 25. I can take example of called Dalits. That's what I teach also. Now, if you keep on going, I have tried to make, there are 45 dimensions of exclusion. 45 dimensions. You can just run through that a little bit. Residential, resources, accepting, interaction, kitchen, temple, clothes, right to wear the clothes, even like umbrella, denial of burial in the funeral ground, and so on and so forth. Now this is something which I like to dwell upon a little bit, of specifically rape of a Dalit woman. You know how many rapes per day? 3 rapes per day of Dalit woman and 2 murders. In all, I collected the data, 3,750 cases in 10 years. This was the process of atrocity. This was the, atrocity cases. Cleaning of human excreta still goes on. Then scavenging, midwifery role, removing of carcasses, piggery, butchery, cleaning of wild goats and all those, it goes on still. Of course, there are laws, no doubt, there are laws. But they are more in a book rather than being implemented. We can go on, yeah. Even in process of globalization, in the era of globalization, if somebody knows an identity of a Dalit, he will not be carry on his occupation other than his caste occupation. There are interesting studies which people did, that one Dalit opened a shop, a tea shop, and all of a sudden people came to know his identity, and he was forced to shut that because people beat him. People said that how can you do that? But the interesting part for us is that, enemies from within, white and black differences can be seen. Oppression and exclusion can be observed. But here it is difficult. Muslim and Hindu differences can be observed, can be analyzed on the basis of where they go, where they live, whom they worship. But it's difficult to analyze, and that is why the exclusion based on caste in India has escaped the imagination of the Western audience, Western analysts, or they know it, but deliberately they have denied to analyze. So this exclusion process is such a big, plays such a big role that it's very difficult to look a very, very successful process of globalization with Shining India campaign is basically registered. Now, let me give you data that yes, India is hopeful from the process of globalization, because of course India has 65% of its population which is below 35. And they say that it is youth nation, and youth nation of course has a manpower and they can supply manpower. And that's what China and India are, in a BRICS situation. In a BRICS situation, people are ready to argue that what will India and China can supply? Because ores will come from Brazil and Russia. But manpower, labor will be supplied by China. Of course, technology is one of them. But really, is is India a worthy candidate for BRICS? That is the question which starts emerging. And it is in this context that let me quote a little bit more data to see that how question of availability, accessibility, and adaptability comes. Things are available. Because of globalization, things are available. But are they accessible? This is the question which I am asking. As a professor of a university, before 6th Pay Commission came, I was not able to buy a laptop. Because if I bought a laptop, I had to pay 2 months' salary. What will I eat? Laptops were available. And if suppose I had a heart disease, then I'm gone. There are drugs. There are drugs, you know. And there are, of course, hospitals. Whether we can go, I can go there? No, I cannot. Now it is in this context that we start evaluating the levels of poverty. And levels of poverty, if you see, I think it's page number 21. Can you think? That? Yeah. Page number 21. Yeah. Page number 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 78% of India, it is Arjun Sen Gupta. Arjun Sen Gupta report. 78% of Indians live less than 20 rupees per day. And that was, you know, that was basically justified. It was not only one person has said. Again, Tendulkar report. Tendulkar report said that 25.7% of urban residents, they live below 19 rupees a day.
So when was this data? Which year? Because
This is 2009.
Okay.
This is 2009. Yeah. So it's not very old. Of course, globalization had passed, you know. So now, if this is the poverty, you know, this is the poverty I'm talking about. Now, I had said that objective condition of tradition was agriculture. And let me give you a little bit of data on agriculture. What is happening in agriculture? From 1991 to 2001, 1991 to 2001, nearly 8 million cultivators have quit farming. And if you want to read, this is a very good article by P. Saina, the rural editor of the Hindu. And he writes that, and this is India's farm suicide, 12-year saga. India's farm suicide, 12-year saga. And he writes, 200,000 farmers have committed suicide. India shining. So 2,000 farmers have committed suicide. And then, what about, now, when people leave agriculture, when they commit suicide, now this is not end in itself. It has a cascading effect. And that cascading effect was accepted by our Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh itself, and that was that the farm production, the food production has gone down. And it has gone down in agriculture because the corporate, the people have, first of all, denying loans to people, soft loans are gone. More corporates are buying land, subsidies are being cut, and so on and so forth. But what is the impact? I will give you, not bore with the data, but let me give you this, is very important. One child dies every 5 seconds from hunger-related causes. Every 5 seconds. Now, and it is in this context, the number of undernourished people have increased. It has increased from 194.7 million in 1997 to 213.7 million in 2002. So agriculture is one, poverty is another, and of course literacy, is still that 37%. And this literacy, how it is defined? Those who can read and write. This is literacy. So 37% are still illiterate. What about urbanization? Urbanization, if you see, in terms of people living per square kilometer, I'll give you cases of 4 cosmopolitan cities only. One is Mumbai. Mumbai, if you see the per square kilometer persons living, 30,000 people living in per square kilometer. And Chennai, 26,000 people per square kilometer. Calcutta, 12,000 square per kilometer. And therefore, in total, if you see the slums, the population in slums, and I have data of 10 cities. Out of 26 million people living in cities, in 10 cities I'm talking about, 24% of population lives in slums. Now, having said this, I'm very afraid because I can go on reading the index, HDI and all that. But
is that the biggest 10?
Huh?
The biggest 10 cities?
Yeah.
The top 10?
Yeah. So this process of availability and accessibility then starts shaking. That who is this who wants to really perpetuate the process of globalization, and who benefits, how much that benefits is there, and even the most affluent is not able to survive. And I'm trying to give you an example, very latest, Kingfisher. Kingfisher started with great fanfare, its airlines. And today it's on verge of closure. Many sectors they have closed already. And they have threatened that, look, these people are going. Now, the whole process that India is on the verge of becoming superpower with the process of globalization as a part of BRICS makes me very uncomfortable. And the process of exclusion, which existed centuries ago, exists today, and we see that how many more are being added to it. Now, why this whole celebration? Is it a really politics or it's a reality? The celebration of globalization and India going to be becoming a superpower with all its excluded masses is a question I think we need to ask. That's what I wanted to sum up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kumar, for a very insightful and stimulating talk. And we'll have the discussion now. We'll take questions. Do you want to take individual questions, or do you want to collect a few questions and then answer? How would you?
As the August gathering decides.
Okay. We'll collect a few questions. I'm speaking on behalf of the August gathering, so I hope they agree and we can answer. So please raise your hand.
Before you do that, I wanted to read a difference between China and India. And this was written long back by Friedrich Hegel in his book called Philosophy of History. And you know, because we were talking about BRICS and people always give, look, China is doing very well. And what did he write? You know, this is basically 1944 he was writing. And I think you can read it. Huh? I don't have to read, I think. Fine.
Yeah, let's read it. Let's read it.
If we take a general view of the comparative condition of India and China, we shall see that China was characterized by a thoroughly unimaginative understanding prosaic life and firm and defined reality, while in the Indian world there is, so to speak, no object that can be regarded as real. Everything is Maya. So to speak, no object can be regarded as real and firmly defined, none that was not at its first apprehension perverted by imagination of what it presents to an intelligent consciousness. Among the Hindus, instead of unity, diversity is the fundamental characteristic. Religion, war, handicraft, trade, yes, even the most trivial occupations are parceled out with rigid separation. So I think he was making a very prophetic statement, but he never traveled to India.
Like many good Indologists. So thank you very much, and we'll take questions. Please keep it brief, and we'll try not to have cross conversations, and I'll moderate. So please, first question.
Would like to comment? When you're comparing that the affluent, are basically, are basically being screwed off. Like you get the example of Kingfisher. The issue there, like when you're saying the affluent are like, having it bad compared to the poor, the affluent are having it bad, that's like a very wrong comparison, because the affluent are having it bad when they had all the opportunities and they were trying to like compete in the free market, they failed, which is like something that happens in a free market anyway. Whereas as far as the poor goes, they don't even have the opportunity to like compete in the free market, because in order to compete you need like the necessary capital, and once you're out of wealth, you're anyway out of the process of your competing. So it's like two different processes. Kingfisher failing is like a fault of Kingfisher, whereas a poor person who's like not earning a good wealth or is not even making any good money, that's not his fault basically. So I just wanted to like make the distinction.
Thanks for very insightful talk. And I have a question, because this process, as you mentioned about the India modernization and globalization, is this same process is happening in the West too? And what are the effects of that? And how it's going to be different, or it is different than what is happening in India or South Asia or third world countries, whatever.
We'll take one more and then we'll stop and allow him to answer. So.
What were the two questions that you said you were going to ask us? You said you would pose two questions, and they flew over my head. I didn't quite catch those two questions.
In the middle of your presentation, you asked a couple of questions. I think that's what
You are lost.
Yeah, I'm an absent-minded professor, you see.
What were the two questions you wanted to pose, or you said you would?
pose us two questions at the beginning.
I think I began by saying this, that the process of globalization is a very small fraction of the Indian history, and yet people have given their conclusion. Is it correct? That's what one. I think I began with this. And the second thing is that